Alrighty, folks, and we are live. Thank you guys so much for chiming in for the latest post-game show here on WardyNYM, folks. And unfortunately, after winning 6 straight ball games, the New York Mets falter to the Brewers. Coincidentally enough, the number 6 stays true as they drop this series finale 6-0, thanks to that big grand slam from a nobody for the Brewers. But again, I wasn't happy with that decision by Buck Showalter to throw in Drew Smith in a bases loaded 2-out situation, even though we got ahead in the count. It was, again, something we're going forward. I don't understand for Buck's decision making there. I really don't. Again, that was just one of multiple gripes I had with this game. This isn't going to be a crazy rant show after a loss like this that we saw in the Cubs series, because again, the Mets are coming off of a 6-game winning streak. This is not the sky falling, but you see the Braves finally drop a baseball game after they themselves were on a winning streak of 5 games, and yet they lose 3-2 in their series finale to the Nationals. And another opportunity for the Mets where they could gain ground by a whole game in the NL East lead if they just secured the victory today. The bats didn't show up. The Mets faced some injuries, unfortunately, to their outfielders and Brandon Nimmo, and to a lesser degree, Jeff McNeil, even though he got banged up pretty good today. He was a trooper. He stayed in the ball game for a whole 8 innings or so. But we got plenty to deep dive from this ball game. It was definitely a disappointing game, a disappointing loss for this club, especially when the Mets did not have bad starting pitching. Taijuan Walker was not the reason why the Mets lost this ball game by any stretch. It was the lack of offense for a second consecutive night, only having 4 hits. But the difference with yesterday was that the Mets didn't need 10-plus hits to win a ball game. They just need those big hits with runners in scoring position. They got the job done with a 3-run home run by Alonso last night, which was so awesome, and Lindor with that grand salami. And then the Mets today, unfortunately, don't do anything. And again, when you only have 4 hits on back-to-back days, naturally something's going to give. So I'm going to be deep diving, again, the details from this ball game. I'll try to go through it fairly quick. What led to Nimmo's injuries? How concerned should we be as Mets fans? What's Jeff McNeil's status right now? What is Starling Marte's status? When can we potentially see him back in the Mets line before the year ends? And how Buck has managed the bullpen, why it has been suspect for sure over the past month. Again, when things like this happen for the guy coming out of being on a long IL stint, finally returning the Mets bullpen, I mean, there should have been certainly a better opportunity to throw him in the ball game than to have it a tight one like that when it was only 2-zip. And again, if you give up a grand salami there, then it's a completely different ball game, and the Mets are sure to lose, and that is what held true. So plenty takeaways from this ball game. I'm going to try to talk you guys off of a cliff a little bit in case you're getting ahead of yourselves, but no matter what, make sure to smash that like and subscribe on. Greatly appreciate, folks. Help us get 100 likes for the first short-term goal, and help us get 18K subs for the next short-term goal on the channel. As many of you already know on the channel, but I'll reiterate it once more, we are just around 100K subs away, guys, from doing our next giveaway on the channel, which is a Mad Max Scherzer bobblehead with the strikeout counter. So once we hit 17.7K subs, I'll be giving that away to one random lucky subscriber on the channel. To make sure to smash that button, share the word, and get that out there, and hopefully you have yourself a chance to win it when it is all said and done. But guys, let's talk about this ball game now, because the Mets just did not have it early offensively. They had an opportunity in the second that they couldn't execute on. They had, again, a couple extra base hits. I was debating on having Lindor and Nico in the top 5 because they both had a double apiece, but I mean, there just wasn't enough offensively in this game. And for me, my biggest takeaway before we really deep dive this matchup is, again, I said this like 6 days ago when the Mets got swept by the Cubs and I can't even speak right now. The Braves had themselves a really underwhelming West Coast trip. Yes, it was different opponents, but the point still stands. It feels like these teams just end up not playing their best baseball unless they're both winning that same night. I mean, it's been so few and far in between. You've seen the Mets take advantage for a decent period of time when the Braves are not playing good ball games, when they actually drop a game to a team like the Nationals. And then you see there, I mean, even with the Mets, when they drop games that they have, the Braves didn't take full advantage either at times. So it's been a seesaw back and forth, and that's why we've all known this really for a while now, that it's going to come down to that final series in Atlanta before the season ends. But let's deep dive this ballgame, guys. We got injuries that we got to get into. So we got Taijuan Walker on the bump today facing Adrian Hauser, and this was a matchup that I liked for Ty. And again, I thought Ty pitched perfectly fine today. He was not the demise in the Mets losing this ballgame when you get 4 hits, no earned runs, even though you had 2 extra base hits. Again, that is not going to win you a ball game. So no less in the first, guys, Adames with a walk, Roddy Tellez with a pop out. We see Nimmo would then exit the game with quad tightness there in the bottom of the first in the outfield. And then, Renfroe flies out. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Let me get to the top of the first, then we'll get to the bottom of the first. I wasn't looking at my stats correctly. Nimmo with an opposite field check swing single. You thought it was going to be a good ball game for the Mets when they're getting on base early like that. That would not hold true, however. Nimmo would then steal second base for the third time already out of not doing any stolen bags for the first 5 months of the year, as he's been trying to prohibit injury. People ask me all the time, why doesn't Brandon Nimmo steal bases? It's because he's trying to make sure he stays on the field. He knows that he's had health issues in the past, and it's crazy because the irony is there because Nimmo, who again looked fine, ends up exiting this ball game, and that half inning later, as the Mets will not do anything in the top of the first. Adames with a walk, Tellez with a pop out, as I mentioned, and then Nimmo barely could even run to that ball as he would exit with a left quad tightness. Hopefully it's day to day. We'll see if he gets imaging done. I'm really not awfully concerned with Brandon Nimmo, guys, until proven otherwise. He, again, you saw him. He was walking off the field fine. He just tightened up. Again, a night day to an early game today for the series finale in Milwaukee, but he was talking to Mark Canha. We saw it on the SNY broadcast. He was explaining how it seemed like he got hurt when he was doing his slide into second base. So that just further reaffirms that Brandon, while stealing bases is fun, and as long as you can stay healthy, that's great, it's pretty obvious that this stolen base was a factor into your injury today. So let's just stop with running the bases. You've had a really good season, all things considered, not running the bases, being an elite center fielder. Let's keep it that way. We got some other guys that can steal some bags, even though the Mets aren't the best in baseball by any stretch, especially without Marte in the lineup right now. No less, let's stop running the bases, Brandon, the way that you've been lately, because that led to your injury. That was certainly a factor, and for me, thankfully, that was an injury for Brandon Nimmo with left quad tightness is what the Mets announced. I, again, do not believe it to be a big deal. At this juncture, it looks like it'll more than likely be day-to-day unless imaging comes back that the Mets do and it says something else. Now, thankfully for the Mets, as banged up as they got today, they have a key day off tomorrow as they're going to be flying out to Oakland. That's a big series for them because, again, you're facing the Oakland A's. Time to gain some more ground. Again, we'll see if it happens because we all know the story with this Mets team and playing teams well below 500 hasn't favored them nearly as much as you would have thought or liked it to have here in the month of September. But going back into this ball game, guys, the Brewers do nothing in the first. We get to the second. Daniel Vogelbach with a base knock. Naquin reaches on a fielder's choice. Eduardo Escobar and Yorme fly out to end the inning. So again, it was a snooze fest for quite a bit in this ball game. In the bottom, the second, Taijuan Walker with his first 1-2-3 inning of the day. And the third, Mark Canha coming in as a pinch hitter and coming in. He wasn't even supposed to start today, but because of Nimmo's injury, that led Canha to come in this ball game. The Mets entered today only 2 hit by pitches away from tying the MLB record with 105, and they would surely get that record now with the new MLB record 106. Thank you, MLB, being the schmucks that you are, saying last year that we were going to do the sticky substance change mid-season and lessen hit by pitches, even though it was clear cover-up for you to change the baseballs when you guys had an alarming start last year, underwhelming. One of the worst offensive starts in MLB season in decades was the case back in 2021. That's why they switched to baseballs. It was never about hit by pitches. Do not get it twisted. It's always about increasing offense because offense is what sells. So, speaking of hit by pitches, Mark Canha, who had the day off to begin with, he was someone that, again, got hit multiple times already in this series, and he gets drilled on the first time that he faces Adrian Houser today. That would be a team record now. Season record of 23 hit by pitches, surpasses Brandon Nimmo, and wouldn't even be the last time he'd be hit in tonight's game. Lindor would have line out, McNeil would fly, would end the inning. In the bottom of the third, Taylor would have strikeout, Mitchell would have infield single, Yelly would have pop out, and that is where McNeil tumbles. You guys have probably seen it in the graphic by now. He looked like he tumbled, but was okay. He told, the trainer to go off. He knew that, especially with Canha in this ballgame, the Mets have no other real outfield options that can potentially hit other than Darren Ruff, who is not known for playing well in left field. We saw him tumble during his time with San Francisco in that Mets series back in San Fran in June. Darren Ruff is not the greatest outfielder. We know that, especially in left. Terrence Gore, you put him out there, might have great defensive speed, but you're not going to get hits. In hindsight, it would have been better off probably to just pull Jeff from the game because the Mets would do nothing offensively, but hindsight's 2020 now. It is what it is. And Jeff stayed in this ball game But he tumbled, he planted his foot wrong. It seemed like he was having some hip issues throughout the game, was tightening up really bad on him. I know a thing or two about hip issues. I've actually dislocated both my hips. And I want to say it was my right. I think it was my right hip. I've like popped out twice. Back when I used to play, competitive travel soccer and was on the fitness team for my high school. Always was a big runner, and a lot of times I get pigeon-toed, and a lot of times I would turn my foot a little too far in when I'd run, and when that would happen, bam, hip just pops right out. So I know the pain of hips. Like my left one is tight right now as we speak, just because I didn't stretch much earlier today. So I can only imagine the pain that Jeff was going through. He was barely able to run the bases. He still managed to play a decent left field and had a nice, really, really good throw to second base later on this ball game. Jeff's a trooper for staying in there. Again, he was just banged up and bruised today, as were the Mets as a whole. So nothing awfully concerning on Jeff's front. It just sucks that, again, the Mets got as banged up as they did in this ball game in the series finale in Milwaukee. But going back to this ball game to break things down, and as we see there, nothing would happen with the Brewers in the bottom of the third and the fourth with 2 outs. Tyler Naquin, who owns Adrian Hauser, was like 6 for 9 entering this game against him. He would get himself a double off Adrian Hauser. However, the Mets would do nothing with it, as Eduardo Escobar would soon ground out after it and the inning. In the bottom of the fourth, Hunter Renfroe with a single, Colin Wong with a pop-up, and Peterson flies out to end the inning as well. In the fifth, with 2 outs, Marquetta, second at bat, second hit by pitch, ties the MLB record at 105. Ridiculous. Hauser would exit the game. Milner would come in. Lindor with a double. Mets have guys in scoring position, however, not able to execute, as McNeil, again, a soft ground out, barely trod down first. He was still in excruciating pain from his tumble that he dealt with the previous 2 innings. And then we get guys in the bottom of the fifth with 2 outs. Mitchell with a single and Yelly with a ground out ends the inning. But as we get to the 6th inning, this is where things will start to change. First batter that Taijuan Walker sees is Willie Adames, who has owned the Mets throughout the series. And he continued that with a solo bomb to give the Brewers an early 1-0 lead. Not early, I would say fairly late game 1-0 lead. Tellez with a walk, Renfroe with a double play, and Wong strikeout ends the inning. In the 7th, then, guys, as the Mets are already down by 1, do nothing in the 6th, Brad Boxberger comes in, Gourmet with a walk. The Mets don't do anything with it, unfortunately. In the bottom of the 7th, you see there Peterson with a walk, that being Jace Peterson for the Brewers, not the pitcher Peterson for the Mets. Carantini with a single, Taylor RBI, bloop single, Walker would exit, Peterson would come in after it's a 2-0 ball game. Mitchell with a sac bunt, Yelich with a strikeout, Adames was intentionally walked, and this is where the controversy really starts to begin for bullpen management for the Mets. So the Mets' thought process was, okay, we're going to intentionally walk Adames because he's been raking this series. We decide to have Pearson match up with Tellez lefty on lefty. They take Tellez out of the ball game and have, what's his name, Brousseau, come in as a pinch hitter, who again isn't having a bad season, just a guy that I'm not too familiar with, so I'm not trying to shit on the guy. But he comes in, righty on lefty. Peterson can get righties out just fine as long as he commands the strike zone. But instead, Buck Showalter decides to go with the man that hasn't pitched for the Mets in easily a month and a half. It's been a long time since Drew Smith has pitched for the Mets out of the bullpen, coming off the IL and building up through rehab. He returns, 0-2 count, and then just gets one right down the dick, and that is a grand salami that Jeff McNeil climbs the wall and left and falls hard on his side once more. Jeff McNeil banged up all day long, and that is where the Mets truly lost the ball game, as it was a 6-0 lead for the Brewers. And there's really nothing else that needs to be said about this game. Tyler McGill will come in to pitch a scoreless inning, which is awesome to see. A nice bounce back from the home run that he gave up to Rowdy Tellez, no less, back in game 1 of the series, in which the Mets ended up winning the ball game. But still, or was it game 1 or was it yesterday? I'm forgetting. Was it game 1? It might have been game. My days are such a blur nowadays. Darren, what's up, my man? Thank you so much for chiming in. Great member on the channel. Appreciate all my members and live viewers in here. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe on, guys. Love you, brother. I know you got to watch the game today in the UK. It was a nice time for you, and unfortunately, the Mets couldn't execute. That's brutal. So my biggest takeaways, again, guys, from this ball game is, 1, Mets got banged up really bad. It's beyond unfortunate. It is what it is. And every game is so vital and so important for this club now as they go forward, with only 11 games left of the regular season before playoffs begin. If you saw how the Mets operated today, There are some slight concerns, I would say, from the offensive standpoint as a collective whole. They did not show up in unison yesterday or today. And if you saw in, pardon me, and again, you kind of understood the slow start yesterday after having, I'm sure, a late night after clinching playoffs in game one, but they got the big bats to have success when they needed most. Today, polar opposite, they got nothing going. And again, to have back-to-back games with only 4 hits, that's only going to get you so far. And that unfortunately held true in this 6-0 loss. And outside the Mets not having enough offense, it comes down to, for me, I do feel that the Mets would have had a better chance to rally if, of course, that grand slam didn't happen. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. If you're down by 2-0, you have a stronger comfortability than what you do if you were, say, down by 6-0. And I do not agree with that decision by Buck wholeheartedly. I was happy to see Drew Smith back, but that just felt like the wrong timing. That's why when Tyler McGill came in for the Mets, when they already had a 5-0 lead earlier in this series, it made more sense to have McGill come in the ball game. Even though he gave up the 2-run bomb, it didn't matter because that's a nice gap, a nice leash to give for Tyler to make his Mets debut coming off the IL. Not in a situation where it's a 2-0 ball game, a crucial ball game for the Mets to try to finally gain some ground on the Braves that rarely drop a game. Do so earlier today, mid-game while the Mets are still playing, dropping 3-2 to the Nationals, of course. And you have bases juiced. And I mean, I just don't get it. I really don't get it. If Peterson, obviously, people may gripe by saying, oh, if Peterson hung a slider and that led to a bomb, people are going to critique either way. But in my personal opinion, I don't like this one because it unfortunately was a factor, of course, in the Mets' loss. But two, more than anything, it can affect the confidence level of Drew Smith, who, again, is trying to get his bearings straight, versus a guy like McGill, who, yes, he didn't have a great first outing here, but he had the leash. He had the room to allow a run or two. And then he comes out today and pitches a scoreless inning. So I'm sure he's feeling better right now mentally than what Drew is. I mean, it's not a good thing at all for Drew Smith, who is trying to get himself reacclimated in this bullpen. And this is something where we all love Buck to death. Do not get me wrong. But when there's rightful criticism, we're going to call it out. I unfortunately do believe that was one of those situations. And I understand that Drew Smith, it was a 1-out situation. I get that. And I get he was on an 0-2 count. And yes, if he gets that out, then we do have a little bit of a different discussion. But at the end of the day, when you're only 12 games left on the season, including today's game, results matter. Everything matters. Results will dictate how us fans feel and how we are going to be evaluating things, because wins mean more than everything now as the Mets try to stay afloat in first in this division and hopefully stay in that division lead by the season's end, entering playoffs. So it is what it is. You know, I'm not going to gripe about it a crazy amount. I didn't agree with the decision, but we move on because that's all that we can do at this point. And from the offensive standpoint, when you look at Starling Marte now, he was hoping to be swinging the bat and catching some baseballs as soon as today, if not tomorrow, heading into the Oakland A's series. He has hopes of returning by latest the time that the Mets match up against the Atlanta Braves. So fingers crossed, because if the Mets can have Starling Marte close to 100% facing the Braves, this lineup just gets that much deeper, and that is something that can be a huge impact in making or breaking who not only wins that series, but ultimately who's going to surely win the division. Brandon Nimmo, as we already discussed earlier in the show, exits today's game after a stolen base, can handle things in the outfield with left quad tightness. We'll see. We'll find out tomorrow within the next day or two what is his status going to be. But if I'm a betting man, I would say that's nothing too drastic. He seemed comfortable. Again, he just knew he tightened up, and these things happen from time to time. As long as it's day-to-day, the Mets are going to be fine on that front. And Jeff McNeil just getting banged up a lot. The Mets having now the new hit-by-pitch record with a total of 106. 106 with still 11 games to go. I'm going to go on a limb and say that the Mets are going to hit at minimum 110 before the year ends. I mean, they're just blown. It's crazy because we've known this story literally since the beginning of the season, and people said, calm down, things are going to change. And laying me on when things have changed. Please do. I would love to hear it because they haven't changed. Let me get to a donation quick, guys. Going to share a couple more thoughts, and then we're going to wrap up the show. We're not going to do a long show today. I'm exhausted as well. I was up really late last night. I'm going to just try to enjoy this day. It's never as easy to enjoy a day like this. 0-2, you can't hang a slider like that. I 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. If you're going to go slider 0-2, you got to make sure that bad boy is far down away and try to get him the chase. And that's just further reasoning as to why Drew Smith, you can argue, shouldn't have been in that spot for a guy that hasn't pitched out of the bullpen for the Mets in quite a bit now coming off the IL. Yeah, no shit, he's rusty. I'm not expecting him to come out and be guns a-blazing right away. Same way that Tyler McGill wasn't, and yet he already had a much better outing his second time out in the series than he did in game one of this matchup. Let's see, Tim, thank you for the $5 dono. We never win when the Braves lose. I don't get it. We need like a 3-game lead going into Atlanta because last time there we got smoked. The Mets did get smoked. They had poor offense in that series. However, I do fully expect things to be different. And the factors, not too much, I would say, with Taijuan Walker and Carlos Carrasco. But the Mets were throwing out relievers that shouldn't have even been on this roster when the Braves were hitting. But it was one of those things where it was a double-edged sword because you could argue that if those pitchers stayed healthy and didn't get hurt in those first 2 games, it could have been maybe a little bit of a different direction of a ball game, especially if they got length from them and the Mets maybe built momentum while only be down by a couple runs versus being down by a boatload of runs. Not long into those ball games, because we know that when the Mets are down by a significant deficit, what we've seen for quite a bit in this second half is they more often than not really struggle to come back. Now, yesterday was a nice, refreshing win while being down 4 runs later in the ballgame. That hasn't happened too often for the Mets here in the second half, where they've overcome that adversity once you're, say, 5-6 innings into a matchup. But yeah, when you look back at that previous Atlanta series, I don't think that's going to be the case at all. The Mets currently, again, with no setbacks, knocking on wood, they're expected to have Max Scherzer. They're expected to have Jacob deGrom. And I do believe Chris Bassett should be all 3 starters in that series. So as long as they do what they're supposed to do, this offense just needs to do what they're supposed to do as well. So it's a wait and see. I'm looking forward to that matchup when we eventually get there. It's going to be a crazy time. But Tim, thank you so much for that donation. And guys, that is about going to wrap up the show. Like I said, not a long one today. I am going to be coming out with a new podcast. Episode 23 of Bleav in Queens will be out, I would presume, early on Friday, probably around, I'd say, 10:30 a.m., 11 or 12 p.m., latest Eastern time. It'll come out 6 a.m. audio. We're not coming out with the pod tomorrow while everyone else's podcasts are, just because of our schedules aren't aligning. But that's okay, because the reason why we're having the pod not come out on the off day, but the day of the Oakland A's series starting, is we have a very special guest that's going to be coming on the show for a little bit. That is the perfect man imaginable to come on and discuss the upcoming series for the New York Mets. That is the Oakland A's. So you guys probably get a good idea on who that is going to be. I'm very excited to get that out there for you. That will be dropping early Friday, wherever you get your podcast, audio and video, and of course here on WardyNYM. With that being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I love you all to death. Hopefully the Mets bounce back. There will not be many post-game shows over the weekend. No post-game show Friday. No post-game show Saturday. At most, might do a quick recap on my phone, but that's wishful thinking. Busy weekend, but I will be back Sunday, hopefully with a post-game show, and then I will be recording my podcast later that night with another special guest, as we would then be previewing the Marlins series. So plenty of stuff coming on the channel, all things considered. Thank you all so much, and until next time, let's go Mets, baby. We'll see you in Oakland. Peace out.